Or under not enough teachers. We also, I don't think anyone would think, oh, we want to cut meals from schools. I think one of the wonderful things that we do in the public school system is we make sure that every child is fed every day. I will tell you personally, from my experience, both of my children attend Title I schools, and I am so glad they get to experience a diverse environment of children. They learn so much from their classmates. It happens to have been the annual Title I funding meeting today. Every school has to do it annually. And I was actually thinking about this forum I was coming to, and they were talking at James K. Polk about how the Title I funds are so wonderful because they can be used to fund an extra reading specialist that they wouldn't otherwise be able to have. We can fund an extra instructional coach. If you don't know, instructional coaches are so important for our first and second and sometimes third year teachers who are just learning what they're doing. They help them implement the curriculum effectively. And so I just think that the funds are really important.
Okay. So Mark, I was reading what you wrote last week in your column, and I was reading some press coverage just this morning of the joint meeting between the City Council and the school board last night, or yesterday afternoon, right, in the afternoon. And it sounded as if you couldn't get a mixed martial arts channel, you could have watched this meeting, because it was acrimonious by all reports. The school board vice chair said it was evidence of a persistent dysfunction in the city between the school board and the City Council. Former Vice Mayor John Chapman, who's now just a member of council, said in his 12 years on council, he's never seen more acrimonious discussion between the school board and the City Council. And you'd think that, given the experience of some members on both bodies, there would be some comedy, some degree of comfort with each other and understanding each other's points of view. So what do you think led to this sort of explosion yesterday that exposed this rift? And I'm only going to say one aspect of that rift is that there had been on the table for months a proposal that the DASH system be allowed to transport high school students. And the school board essentially announced at this meeting that they were no longer interested in having that cooperative agreement with the city. So what's your perspective on what's going on? It's okay, you're my friends here.
You remember Cool Hand Luke?
Oh, yeah.
What we have here is a failure to communicate. There's an inside view and an outside view in all these things. I was at the meeting last night. I have an outside view. It was very perplexing. The agenda item was a discussion of the DASH pilot, which would involve using DASH buses on 2 routes to transport high school students in the middle of the day. And the city and school and DASH representatives were there, staff were there ready to talk, and it came out early in the meeting that the school board was not interested. I think there are probably fairly extensive reasons for that. I don't think it's an arbitrary decision. But I do think that for some reason it wasn't fully communicated or articulated, or the board did not speak as a board to this issue. And so you had this odd situation that 2 groups of elected officials were together to discuss something, and the initial announcement was, we're not interested. So I think somewhere along the line, there was either a failure of communication or a willful failure to listen.
Well, let me ask you to elaborate on that. I mean, I don't want to ascribe sort of any actual ill will between the council and the school board, but you'd think if you're going into a meeting that's pre-scheduled that's the first one of the year talking about school funding and let's collaborate, that you wouldn't have the meeting unless you knew ahead of time there were some things you could agree upon, so you can come out of the meeting with something to tell people was positive. But in this case, that didn't happen. I mean, based on your experience being on school board, that sounds to me like it wasn't a normal process. Is it possible that the, I will say not the acrimony, but the lack of frankness between the two bodies is because they're worried about this litigation and how it could affect the city? Because as I understand from talking to one member of city council, if the federal funds are eventually all pulled from the city because the city doesn't want to cooperate or they lose in court, the city council will be on the hook to make up the rest of the money that was the $20 million Dominic talks about. I mean, do you think there's just a lot of sense of unease on behalf of both bodies that they're not ready to sort of collaborate?
I think that apprehension about the federal funding is out there, but I think we're a long way away from knowing exactly where that comes out. As Mr. Turner makes clear, approximately $10 million comes from the Department of Education to the school system. The other money that comes from the other federal money that comes from Health and Human Services and the Department of Agriculture, the big amount being the amount for school lunch, those agencies are not parties in the litigation that is currently pending in the Fourth Circuit over the Department of Education's proceeding through its Office of Civil Rights to enforce this bathroom use policy, which is directly contrary, as you pointed out, to the law established by the Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. So the question is, what really is at risk here? Is it the full 20 million? Is it the portion that comes from the Department of Education, which is some lesser amount? And we don't know where this litigation is going. It's in a very odd position. The trial court dismissed the case brought by Fairfax County and Arlington County on a very unusual ground. And so we're in the Fourth Circuit, and on September, it was last week, the Alexandria School Board filed a well-done 101-page motion to intervene in the appeal in the Fourth Circuit. So we're part of the litigation now, and I think and I'm sure Mr. Turner has lots of private spreadsheets that he keeps and considers and does various analyses with, but I think we're a long way away from facing the question of exactly how do we make up the funding that we're not getting from the federal government. And I want to say one other thing. When you, Mr. Turner and Ms. Brownback alluded to this, when you look at the list of what the federal money is used for, it's a very deserving list of expenditures, or a list of expenditures for very deserving groups of students. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, Catie and Dominic, let me ask you this to follow up on.
If I could, I did just want to make one comment on the buses. So our students, our secondary students, will still have the ability to ride dash buses. The proposal was to require them to ride dash buses. So our students will still have the ability to ride dash buses, but we want to continue to be able to have the ability to transport them on the yellow school buses as well. So I just wanted to clarify that point. They are not losing their ability to ride the dash bus.
There's a group that elects to ride.
That is correct. There are some students that elect to ride dash based on their schedule at the high school.
Okay. So Dominic and Catie, after hearing what Mark just said, when we talked tonight about politics and shaping the budget, we never thought that politics would involve a conflict between the school board itself and the city council. And I'm wondering if this is sort of just the long-term result of what voters asked for in Alexandria. We have in the audience tonight former Vice Mayor Bill Cleveland. Bill, thanks for being here. And Bill, along with former Councilman Lonnie Rich, led the fight in the 1990s to allow Alexandria to vote on the proposal to let us elect our school boards. That passed. And since that time, we've had school boards elected on a nonpartisan basis over 3 wards. And school board members from time to time, and Mark, you can speak to this, have sort of wanted to sort of flex their muscles about the fact that, you know, we are also elected officials, and we have a mandate from the state, and we have responsibilities to our students via federal laws, and they've wanted to make clear that they are equal partners with the city council. Is part of what happened yesterday and may happen in the future, because certainly the next year's school budget is up in the air. Is this just part of that natural tension that exists between the school board and the council as both being elected bodies, where only the city council has taxing authority and the school board does not? Catie?
Yeah, so I guess I would start by saying that I'm glad we have an elected school board. I've seen how it works in other cities where they're appointed, and it can lead to issues. I mean, I think obviously we see issues this way too, but I'm glad that there are a specific body of people that their responsibility is figuring out the schools and what the schools should be doing, because it's a complicated system. It's really hard. It's really hard to be in compliance with all of the laws and the regulation and make sure that we're doing the best that we can to make sure that every child that goes to ACPS comes out ready for college, ready for the workforce, ready for whatever their future entails after school. There was a second part of your question. I already forgot. I should have read it out.
Is this just a natural outgrowth of the maturity of the relationship between an elected school board that has no taxing authority but lots of pressure on them from parents and taxpayers, and the council that's trying to control its own spending and its own sort of taxing burden on property, from property taxes?
Yeah. I think what I would say is that as a parent and a parent advocate, I think what I have been most disappointed in a way about the city and the funding of the schools and the complications is what I would call them between the bodies, is that I think a lot of times we forget that schools are part of the city. It's not, it feels like it becomes an argument at the city council level of schools versus everything else, but at the end of the day, our city is required to fund our schools. It is how Virginia is set up right now, unfortunately, because of the local composite index. Yes, our city is responsible for a higher percentage of that bill, if you would say, than they would like, but at the end of the day, it's their job. Like, we need strong public schools in order to have a strong city.
Back at you again, Catie. When we talked on the phone last week in preparation for this, you talked about this funding formula that the state requires, very complex. I think the acronym used was JLARC, right?
That was a study, actually.
Study.
Yeah,
the study was supposed to look at whether or not how the state requires localities to fund schools was a fair one, right? And that study was published last year. What did it say? It
was published in 2023, and it looked at the state as a whole, and what it showed is that we are underfunded when you compare us nationally. When you look at the funding in Virginia, we are below the 50-state average. We are also below the surrounding states and partners. One example of Virginia PTA that we like to use is that we are below West Virginia. And so if we want our schools to be strong, we need to make sure we're adequately resourcing them. And we've seen that over the last few years nationally, if you look at test results, they have dropped in Virginia. And I'm sure Mr. Turner would be a better person to break down the percentages and the numbers.
Okay, then Dominic.
Sure, I would love to talk about the LCI, right? So the local composite index. Again, I mentioned this earlier, Alexandria City has a 0.8 LCI, and basically what that is saying is that determines the ability of the locality to support their school system. 0.8 is the highest in the Commonwealth. So as I said earlier, that means that we have to fund 80% of our school system. That local composite index is also in Arlington County as well as Falls Church City. When you look at how...
So Dominic, just so we all understand, is that index a measure essentially of the affluence of the locality? In other words, how much money can be taken based on the value of property?
Correct. It looks at the wealth of the area or the affluence of the locality, their ability to be able to afford to maintain their own school systems. If you do not have the wealth in your city, you may have a 0.4 LCI. That means your locality pays 40% of the school system and the state provides the other 60%. So for Alexandria, they provide 80% and then the state provides essentially 20% to fund our school system. When we look across the Northern Virginia area, as I was saying, Arlington County and Falls Church City, they also have a 0.8 LCI. When you look at the demographics across our school system versus their school system, we have a higher EL population, English learners. So we have in the city of Alexandria the third highest EL population in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We also are among the highest for our SPED population and among the highest for our economically disadvantaged population. Those populations all require supports to be able to provide them the education that they deserve. So with that, we need the additional resources to be able to provide that education. When we look at those other two jurisdictions, there's a vast difference between the funding that is going to ACPS versus the funding that's going to Falls Church City Public Schools and then Arlington County Public Schools. Sorry, my phone is ringing. So when we look at how the LCI works for Alexandria City, we can compare it to two other local jurisdictions, right? And their funding to their school system per pupil is significantly greater than what it is here in the city of Alexandria. And our demographics, we have demographics that require more support. So for instance, EL students, we are required to provide certain supports for EL students. For our students that receive special instructions, we are required to maintain a certain level of effort every year. It's called maintenance of effort. We cannot lower the amount that we are providing our students that are receiving specialized instructions. So with that said, it costs to be able to provide for the students here in Alexandria.
Got it. Mark, so when you were on the school board, how is it so much different today in terms of the understanding of the city council members about their responsibilities that are statutory, such as the one outlined by Dominic, that the state has to fund, the city has to fund 80%. They can't go below that if they may want to. That's their responsibility. Do you think that, I don't want you to criticize the current council, but do you think there is a full understanding? This is a fairly new council, a fairly young council in terms of their years. I don't think most of them have students in the school system. Do you think they don't understand exactly what they're dealing with when they're talking to members of the school board who are so much more immersed in these issues?
I respect and cherish my city council.
God.
And my school board. But I think there's a learning process that goes on, and there are different personalities that come to with each successive council and school board. Think of it as going to as wearing glasses. The council has a certain set of issues that it sees through its lens. The school board has another set of issues. I'm sort of attuned to this because I've seen the school system as a parent, as a teacher, as a school board member, and it's looked completely different to me in each of those roles.
Huh.
And so, yes, there is a degree to which the relationship is structured, so there's an inherent tension. In the crudest of terms, they've got the money, we need it. How can we be most persuasive to them in stating our case? It's an advocacy proposition for the school board, but you can't escape the fact that the council has other things going on, the pump house, all the rest of their demands. Rod, if I could just have a second, I'd really like to thank Catie for bringing up the JLARC study. I'd like to pause on that for a second. JLARC.
First, tell us what the acronym stands for.
Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee.
Okay.
It is essentially the outsourced intelligence of the General Assembly. On the federal level, think the Joint Committee on Taxation. Has historically been highly regarded for its objectivity and its analytical ability. And the 2023 study that Catie alluded to was extremely critical of the way Virginia funds its public schools, beginning with the algorithm or the formula, which nobody understands. I mean, the report, the JLARC report said, this is too complicated. And I thought naively, and our former mayor and others who were involved at the time thought that this was going to be a landmark event, that Virginia would chart a new course because of the JLARC study. And it's been silence. And maybe if there are different results in November in the elections, the JLARC study will be resuscitated. But it's a valuable thing, and it should have.
What did it conclude?
It should have given that one. It concluded, as Catie said, that we are at the bottom end of funding as a state, at the bottom end of funding the schools, and that the way we calculate the entitlement of the localities, and I think Mr. Turner and Catie did a very good job about describing in an overview sense how this works. I think there's even more to the algorithm than you alluded to in your remarks, that it's just too complicated. It needs to be simplified. Virginia really needs to take a step forward in this area. So I'm off the reservation, but I just wanted to thank my colleagues up here for bringing up the JLARC study, because you want to talk about how politics affects the school budget.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like what you're saying is right now that study is sort of in limbo because it was submitted to a Republican governor with a Democratic General Assembly, and that there may be some inertia to do anything about it because of that. But if the November elections go a different way, what you're saying is perhaps this study will be acted upon?
I'm hoping.
I mean, Catie, you have an opinion on that?
Yeah.
Not yet.
I was just going to add that we were hopeful that it would suddenly make a big change, but I don't think it's been very receptive at the governor level. There was a small change that was passed last year in that the support cap increased slightly. So the number of, Virginia currently undercalculates the number of support staff that you need to staff your school properly. One thing that ACPS will often talk about is how they fund above the support cap, and that's why we need extra money. But we know that Virginia is telling us you can't have enough teachers basically for your building. And so a small change that was passed last year was an increase in the support cap. But the hope is that with a different governor, there may be more receptivity to making sure that we can plan better for funding our schools.
Thank you. And I want to thank all people in the audience sending up questions and for writing clearly. This is great. There are a number of questions here about the budget process, essentially, which seems very arcane to many of us. So I'm going to ask Dominic to sort of answer a couple of these in sequence. One is sort of when during the annual budget process do City and ACPS begin talking? I spoke to the superintendent last week in preparation for this panel, and she said, well, we formally submit our budget in March, but actually right now we're already starting to work on the budget with our various sections of the school division. And that's one question, is if you could outline that, Dominic. But if people want to get involved, not just people like Catie, who are, I would call super involved people as parents and PTA members, but if the average citizen wants to get involved, they want to understand what they can do, they may have issues about policy. Transgender might be one. Or they may have issues about, do we need more classes for AP chemistry and STEM courses? I mean, how do people engage with you and the school division to try to have an outcome that they may feel that they're part of?
Absolutely, great question. So transparency is always one of our top priorities. All of our information is always posted online, and we also have our ACPS Express newsletter that also goes out, and our communications team also does a great job using their social media platforms to push messages out as well. Your first question was, when do we start working with the city? Well, the budget process for the school system is 12 months out of the year. It never stops. I have my budget director here sitting in the audience with you all right now. He knows our budget process never stops. A lot of people have a budget season, but we're always working. So even over the summer, we are working with the city to just know what the economic forecast is going to be for them. They usually provide us with some budget guidance based on their economic forecast, either at the beginning of the school year, but formally at the city council retreat that happens in November of every year. Our team, we meet with the Office of Management and Budget, which is the budget office there at the city, every month to go over what we're working on, what they're working on, and how we can work together to get what we need for the students of Alexandria. As far as how do you get involved in the budget, we have lots of different times for citizens to be able to be involved in the budget. If you just want to ask a question, you can send that to ask@acps.k12.va.us. If you want to come and speak, you can speak at any school board meeting. You can sign up to speak at those meetings. We also this year just started a Funding Our Future listening tour. We had one at George Washington and then one at the Minnie Howard campus. And then also I will invite all of you all out to our community forum on October 15th. That is going to be happening at the Minnie Howard campus. So please come out. You'll hear about the budget process from beginning to end. You'll hear about when you can get involved in the budget process. And we want to be able to hear your voice, right? We use your voice as a part of the recommendation that we make to the superintendent. So for those that don't know, the budget goes through multiple drafts, right? So we start with the requested budget from all of the departments and schools. Our office, the budget office, then makes a recommendation to the superintendent, and the public document is the superintendent's proposed budget. That proposed budget then goes to the school board, and we deliberate on that. They will submit their add, deletes, or their amendments to that proposed budget. They will then vote on it and approve that budget. Then we have to work with the city again to get our appropriation for the school. They usually pass their budget towards the end of April. That lets us know what our appropriation level is going to be, and if it's anything different than what the school board approved in February, then we have to make more amendments to get to the final budget in June. So it goes through a long process to get to that end date in June, right? So, and there are lots of stops along the way for you all to be able to come to a public hearing on the budget, forums, listening sessions, or to email in any of your questions. We always want to be able to hear from our community to make sure that we're addressing what we need to with our students.
Okay, Dominic, here's a follow-up question from someone in the audience. Would it be legal for the city of Alexandria to replace either state or federal funds that were pulled back for any reason? In other words, if let's say this kerfuffle with the Department of Education ends up and then pulling back money, or the state pulls back money, is it legal for the city to step and say, we'll fund that, we'll do that ourselves?
Absolutely. The city of Alexandria can fund the school system with however much money that they want, right? The legal requirement is that they fund 80%, right? That's the local composite index. So there's a floor, there isn't a ceiling, right? And we're grateful that there is a floor, but there is no ceiling on how much they can fund. If we do end up losing any funds, of course, we would love to be able to replace that with local resources, right? Because we know our students at Title I schools need those resources. We know our students need to be able to eat, right? It's hard to learn if you're hungry, right? So we know that we need those resources. We know that our students that receive specialized instructions, though, they require some of the most supports. So we know we need those resources as well. So if the city is able to, yes, we would be more than happy to take those resources. So again, there's a floor, not a ceiling.
Okay, that's great. Here's the $64,000 question in my view, and there have been several questions from the audience that kind of address this potentiality. If the state loses federal funding or state funding to any degree, and the school board still says, you know, we need this money for these programs, they're worthy programs, they're for school lunches, or for teaching people English as a foreign language, we need from you, City Council, another $20 million, which equates to, let's just say, a 3 or 4 cent personal property tax increase. What does that do when you've got essentially the body that without any taxing authority says to the body with taxing authority, you've got to put your careers on the line by raising taxes to serve our needs? I mean, Mark, I mean, were you ever in that position in the school board telling the council, you know, we need more money from you and you've got to do what you have to do to raise the money for us?
I was in the position of advocating to the council that the school system's employees be treated equivalently with city employees. So we argued very aggressively about step increases and COLAs, which are now called market rate adjustments. This is, what you're talking about is really a sea change. And it's a change at an order of magnitude that I don't think anybody really wants. And it becomes ultimately a decision for the community and its elected representatives. I don't think we're going to get to that place soon, but I think in light of the current political climate, it's very logical to be thinking along those lines. Exactly what are the priorities? What would we do? For the 33rd year in a row, the city maintained its AAA bond rating. That's an achievement, and that is not something that pertains to every jurisdiction in Virginia or nationwide. And I think the council is appropriately concerned about that because the bond rating relates directly to the city's cost of capital. And so those are, those are some of the concerns that the council is going to have, and they're very legitimate.
I'm sorry. Can I just add something?
Yeah, I want you to add to it because I'm wondering, does the PTA, does the council or the various PTAs talk to council members as much as they talk to school board members about these issues? Because at the end of the day, the burden to raise the money falls on the council, even though in the example of this case with the transgender city's policies, it was the school board that decided to sue. It wasn't the city council. The city council was not part of the legal decision.
Yes, I would say first, I'm proud of our school board and our school for supporting all children and making sure that we're trying to do the right thing for our kids. Yes, PTAC does meet with our city council members. We start shortly. They probably get sick of us by the end of budget season. I keep emailing Mayor Gaskins, can we meet again? And she graciously says yes, usually. And so we do spend a lot of time talking to our city council members. What I would say is that as we launch into this budget season that we already know is going to be really difficult, there is a good chance that we'll start talking about a tax increase at some point. I really hope that as a parent and an advocate and a resident of the city that we stop making it's a tax increase for schools, because schools are part of our city. It's a tax increase for our city. Our city might need more. Schools are part of what needs more, but I'm sure that we're also going to be talking about how fire needs more and police needs more and everybody else. And so I think it really plays into the negative relationship between the school board and the city council that it always becomes is a tax increase just for our schools. It's for our whole city, and they're just part of them.
I mean, last night even, one member of city council, which member was it, Mark, walked out of the meeting, just saying he'd had too much of this sort of constant impasse with the school board.
Mr. Aguirre.
Mr. Aguirre. I'm not sure that's constructive behavior for a member of council with the school board members, but it seems understandable in terms of human nature that, like, why can't we all get along? Dominic, do you have any role to play here? Not necessarily yourself as the chief financial officer for the school system, but does the school system itself have a way to sort of, as Catie says, educate people that school funding is not just about the kids, it's about an entire wellness of the city? Because as Catie, when you and I talked last week, in preparation, you told me how deeply you believe, and the PTA Council believes, not just locally, but at the state level where you're involved, that the education of students leads to things like lower incarceration rates, lower crime rate, a higher degree of employment when people get out of high school. So Dominic, how do you sell that to not just the council but to citizens at large?
So yes, you stole some of my thunder there about how education is important to not just those that have children in the school system, but everybody of the city, right? There are two things that typically drive a local community, and that is your education and your public safety. And as you just said, the better your education is and the more opportunity that you're able to provide individuals, the less crime is, right? You typically see a decrease in crime in areas that have great school systems and opportunities for those that live in a school, that live in that community. You also tend to see businesses want to move into that area that have a great school system, right? Why? Because you're able to get your employees from that community, right? So education in a school, in a community matters or should matter to everybody, not just those that have kids there, right? It's going to improve your property value. It's going to, bring businesses here for you. It's going to give you the workforce that you need. And then as far as my role, what we try to do when we put the budget together, we always try to address all of the needs that we need as a school community, but we try to operate in the realm of possibility, right? We try to operate in the realm of reality, right? We know that money doesn't grow on trees, so we try to put together a budget that is going to address the needs of all of our students.
Thanks. Mark, you look like you want to say something.
I think Mr. Turner hit it just right.
Okay, good. We've had a couple of questions here about school safety and how the budget in the last several years has been adapted to address concerns by parents and the PTA Council about letting our children at the middle school level, in particular high school level, safely engage every day for education. Is that a budget challenge that you had not anticipated, and is it going to continue, Dominic?
So your question is regarding security in school system?
Yeah.
And how will we go about funding that? So we've been funding many different efforts to make sure that we provide safe environments for our school system, for our students in our school system, and we're going to continue to fund safety and security throughout ACPS. That is the number one priority for us, right? We never want to have any student come to school and feel like they're in an unsafe environment. So we're going to continue to fund safety and security. When there are new, ideas, so for instance, the weapons abatement systems that we installed a few years ago, we're going to do that. We want to make sure that our environments in ACPS are as safe as they can be.
Was that looked to say something, Mark? No. No, okay. We have several new schools in the city now. We have mini Howard campus, for example, but I hear from some parents I know and teachers and also Catie that we still have some schools that are 90 years or older that are also going to need to be replaced. And of course, as you know, those investments in capital to do these kind of major school renovations or school replacements or even adding a school as a city increases its population is going to be a challenge. I mean, it looks like you just pulled out a chart there. You want to explain, Dominic, what you're looking at there? So the average age of our school buildings here in the city of Alexandria is over 51 years, right? And that's largely because we just opened 2 new school buildings in the last 2 years. If you remove those 2 school buildings, the averages get closer to 60. The useful life of a school building is about 50 years, right? If you have great maintenance over those 50 years, you can tend to stretch it for about 60 years. Tends to be the standards for the useful life of a school building. We have more than half of our school buildings are older than 50 years, right? And that comes from, there was a long time where there wasn't an investment in capital improvement for the schools in the city of Alexandria. So now we're having to put, infusion of cash to the capital improvement program to be able to modernize our facilities and build new facilities, because as the city was growing, we didn't keep up with that in terms of seats for our students. So now we have to do that, and that's one of the pressures on the city's budget, right? So the city has to finance the building of our schools, right? The school board does not have the authority to go out and sell bonds to be able to finance the construction of these buildings. How do you pay back your bonds? You need the money on your operating fund to pay the debt service, right? Think of your mortgage for your home. You have to make those payments to be able to do that. So because we were behind and we now have built several buildings over the last 20 years, I think about 6 new school buildings over the last 20 years, that has increased the amount of debt service for the city. And
that puts a strain on the budget. If you're paying your debt, then you don't have the money to do the things on the operating side, such as hire new teachers or police force or so forth. So we really want to keep an approach where we are keeping up with the growth of the city, right? It would be more beneficial if we're doing that on a schedule versus having to build so many so quickly, right? And that happened because we didn't build any for a very long time.
And from reading some school site documents, what I gleaned from that is that the schools are increasing in population gradually. Some schools are over the capacity that would be ideal for them to be operating at. And this brings me to a question for the audience that I find very interesting. This is really where you intersect the budget and local politics. So you're dealing with a school system with a growing population and the need for new schools and maybe even an additional school or even an additional high school. At the same time, the city council is pursuing policies to increase the population of the city, which is at 160,000, I think now. But the former mayor, Justin Wilson, said his goal was to get to 250,000 people by 2050, which would make us the densest place in America. And of course, would require probably lots of new schools. So, I mean, is there a discussion going on, and maybe Mark and Catie, you're best able to answer this, between the council and the citizenry about, well, you know, you may want more housing, because you want more property taxes, you want more housing because you want affordable housing, but every time you put people in a unit, they're maybe going to have kids, and those kids are going to need to be schooled. And I know from looking at my own tax bill, if I'm paying, let's say, $13,000 a year in property taxes, which I don't mind, if I were to have children in the system today, they'd be asking for $16,000 or $17,000 for that child. So I'm not even at as a high-end homeowner paying for my child's education. So is there any sort of meeting of the minds or discussion on this whole idea of growth in population and what that does to the responsibility and the cost of the city to educate its students? Does that exist at all?
Yes, and that was the second part of last night's meeting. One of the positive developments since I was involved at the board level, and I try not to start too many sentences with back in the day, but one of the things that did not, that conversation was one of the things that did not happen back in the day, and now the school system's planning and demographic folks meet with the planning and zoning every other week, and the most impressive sort of we're on the same page, cooperative, collaborative endeavor that I've seen in a long time is the relationship between planning and zoning, and I think former Director Moritz and Jeff Farner and others should take credit for this, and Sophie Humer and others from the school system. That's where that conversation is going on. You can argue that it needs to go on more directly and more explicitly at the school board city council level. They've got apparently lots of things to talk about, but that's a real positive. That's a real positive. And to amplify on what Mr. Turner said, when the school system opened Samuel Tucker, that was the first new school in Alexandria in 30 years. That was right around 1999, 2000, if I'm correct. And since then, new high school, new Minnie Howard, new Jefferson Houston, new MacArthur, Ferdinand Day, new Patrick Henry, or if you have a 30-year perspective, or 25-year perspective, a significant portion of the school system's physical plant has been rebuilt.
Over the last 25 years, absolutely. You have an amazing memory, by the way, because John Adams was built in 1966. The next school building, Samuel Tucker, wasn't built until 2000. So 34 years of city growth and no additional seats added to the school system. And you made a great point as well. As the city has new projects in the city, that always impacts the school system. And under Dr. Hart, with Sophie Humer, they work with the city team to project out what those city projects are going to mean for additional students to ACPS. So that provides us with a great insight on how we need to plan both on the operating side as well as the capital side, right? The capital side of building the infrastructure of the new school building. So that is what kind of guides our capital improvement program or how many seats we need.
Well, I'll ask all three.
This is a real example of nerdiness in action. These folks can tell you what the projected yield of students is depending on the type of apartment complex that's involved. I mean, they have drilled down.
I'll ask all three of you this question because it's a follow-up to what we're talking about. I mean, right now, this whole discussion seems to be happening with some degree of urgency within the school system and its own planning demographics. But is there any sense that at some point, either the former school board members, city council members, parents, PTAs, the schools will say to the city council, slow down on the development. We can't keep absorbing all these people and the financial obligation we have towards students, because I'll get back to the thing I said earlier. Even if you pay a lot of property tax to the city and you're fairly well off, you're still not paying for the one student to go to our school system. And all that money has to come from somewhere. And right now, the council seems to be making its decisions on development and population growth without really listening to the ability of the school board to absorb the capital improvements needed, and not to mention that, finding enough qualified teachers to teach in the system.
All right, I'll jump in. I would say that I think it's really important that we increase the variety of price levels, I guess I would say, for housing within our city. Right now, the majority of our teachers can't afford to live within our city because it's too expensive. We have teachers that commute from outer Fairfax. I know a teacher that comes from Annapolis to come teach, and they're wonderful teachers and we want to keep them in our schools, but they can't afford to live here. And at some point, that commute gets too long and we lose them and we have to start over with a fresh new teacher.
Thank you. Mark, did you want to talk about that? No? Yep, okay. Dominic?
I think the only thing that I can really add to that is, every decision has a consequence, right? As we are developing the city, we have to think about how that impacts the school system, right? And if we are going to continue to grow, then we need to be figuring out how do we then fund the additional school buildings, and then how do we also fund annually the operating costs to maintain that school system.
Thanks. It sounds like from what you've said and what Catie said and what I think some of us in this room may know is that the city council, that's not a top of mind concern for them when it comes to development. What they want is the development and sort of to hell with the consequences. Because I've heard this as well from the former police chief, is that the city didn't take into account how many policemen we needed when they add population and need more patrols in the 3 sectors of city patrols. So that's my one editorial. Anyway, we've kind of come to the end of our allotted hour here. Is there any more question from the audience that should be asked? If so, bring up your card. If not, I want to thank these 3 people with a loud round of applause from all of you, please. I hope you've learned something. One thing we're doing new this year, we're not streaming the program, but we are going to be having the program on our YouTube channel, so that if you want to watch it subsequently, you want to recommend it to a friend or a neighbor or another member of Agenda Alexandria, you can do that. Steve, I'm not sure when this will be up and ready to view, but I'm hoping it will be soon. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I hope you like this new venue, because I do. I hope you use it again. Thank you very much.
I just have a quick reminder that on October 27th, we will be hosting the event called Is Civil Discourse a Dying Art? It will be addressing respectful discussion, the absence of acrimony, and I'm just going to invite maybe the city council and the school board to attend, because we may be able to help with that dysfunction that I read about in the paper. Thank you very much.
This is Agenda Alexandria, a nonpartisan organization that takes a look at the issues without taking sides. Whether it's the city's sewer system, education, public safety, climate change, or perhaps a look back into Alexandria's history, Agenda Alexandria is here to shine a light. What makes the organization so successful is our people. The people who run it, our panelists, our moderators, and of course, our members. Agenda Alexandria is a member-funded organization, and we invite you to become one today by visiting agendaalexandria.org.